Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by Jack Kane Ford. Find your next Ford Tough vehicle at caneford.com. Woodhill Community Center. Have a hand in the heart of the city. Support their mission with your donations at woodhillcommunitycenter.org. Toyota in Nicholasville Superstore. Online consultants are standing by right now to help you find your next Toyota. Visit toyotaonnicholasville.com. Lexus of Lexington, home of the best-selling Lexus IS. Find yours today at lexusoflexington.com. Did you know that half of America is single? Hollywood has never produced anything like this before. The Dating Project, a groundbreaking documentary that follows 5 single people, ages 18 to 40, as they search for authentic and meaningful relationships. There is no script. There are no actors. These are real people trying to find love and happiness in an age of swiping left or right. From Empower Pictures, Paulus Productions, Family Theater Productions, and PureFlix, you can now own The Dating Project. Save the date by visiting thedatingprojectmovie.com and go a step further and help others in your circle date differently by partnering with Ascension Press. Visit shop.ascensionpress.com to acquire the companion study guide. The Dating Project movie is now available on DVD and digital download on Amazon, iTunes, and Walmart. Please visit thedatingprojectmovie.com for details.
Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. I am so happy to be back with you behind the microphone and happy to take on what to me is a really, really special topic today with a new guest. She's a new friend. I'll call her a new friend of mine. Our guest today is Susan Monroe, who comes to us originally from North Carolina, but she's actually been living with her husband, John, in Atlanta for the last 30 years. She's raised her family there. She's a convert to Catholicism, but she took that conversion process and grew it into an absolutely beautiful apostolate, Rosa, Mystica medals, which she started all the way back in 2008. Welcome to the show, Susan Monroe.
Hey, how are you?
I'm terrific. Well, I always like to start off by asking people a little bit about what your story is. So when somebody asks you about your story, just to tell them about yourself, Susan, how do you usually answer that question?
Gosh, I haven't had anybody ask me that in so long. I grew up in a lovely family, a Christian family. I was a Presbyterian, and then in graduate school, and he was Catholic, and we married. And after we married, I decided when I was pregnant, I just realized it was super important to me for our family to all be in the same faith. And I'd been raised in a family that was very accepting of other faiths and other religions. And when I told my mom I was going to be Catholic, she said, "Oh, Susan, I'm not surprised. All your friends were." And I was like, you're right. They were. So I became Catholic, and, we have raised our family here in North Carolina. I now have 3 grown kids. One's married, one's getting married, and one is a senior in college. And we're empty nesters now and just really loving it. It's nice to know we still like each other after all this time. I mean, we're now that we're by ourselves together.
It's funny that you say that, Susan. I have to laugh because I don't know if we're allowed to say to our kids that we love the empty nest. I'm the parent of 2, and my nest is just about empty. My oldest is married, and so now I have a wonderful daughter-in-law, and then my youngest just finished grad school, and most of the time our nest is empty, although I think every once in a while that one or the other of the birds could fly back home. But every time I say, "Oh, I love the empty nest," I want them to think, well, it's not that we don't miss you.
I know.
But it's kind of fun to
landed back in the past 2 weeks, and it's a readjustment getting back together and all, but it's great.
Yeah, and it's fun to find out that you actually are still madly in love with your best friend, too. That's super awesome.
Yes, it's true. Very true.
That's great. Well, somewhere along the path, you got over what you told me was somewhat of a saint phobia, and you've kind of made your life work about saints now. But let's talk a little bit about this saint phobia. So as somebody who is a convert to the faith, before we jump into Rosa Mystica, what is that all about, a saint phobia?
I was very curious about saints, and I remember distinctly after John and I were married having a conversation in a restaurant and asking him about saints. I just did not understand, why are they necessary? What is the point when you can pray straight to Jesus? And he's like, you don't have to pray to a saint, and it's not praying to them anyway. It's like asking me to pray with you. And I got so frustrated and felt so unusually emotional about it. I started to cry in the restaurant and sort of realized I need to come to some resolution about this, because it was really weighing on my heart. And I prayed about it, of course, and went into my church library and found a little book about St. Therese of Lisieux. And I thought, I'm going to read this because I just don't understand. Does God make saints? Are they truly something special, or is it people need someone to look up to, so they're making this person a saint? And I read that book and fell in love with her. Just fell in love, and I really felt called out. I was like, okay, this is someone I could pray with, I could pray to. And but then I was worried, like, am I going to be taking something away from Jesus? Is he could be jealous if I'm jealous, but displeasing to him? I'm praying to a saint and not directly to him. So I prayed for some guidance in that and asked basically for a sign. And over the next couple of days, we went to a bookstore at the monastery that's near here in Conyers. And when I walked in the door, I looked on the floor, and there was a medal on the floor in front of me. I picked it up, and it was St. Therese. It's like, oh, well, this is pretty cool. So I took that and thought, that's nice, but I would like a little more. I want it all. I wanted a little more confirmation. And the next night I had gone out to something and came back, and on the front table were two magazines stacked one on top of the other. One was a little prayer book, and it had Jesus' picture on it, and he was looking so intently off the cover of this book right at me. It just chilled me. I just stopped, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is for me. I knew it in my heart. And I picked that book and looked underneath it was a flower catalog, and it said the catalog of 1,000 roses, which is St. Therese's, what she does, her way of expressing. And it made me, just thinking about it now makes me so happy. I felt like that was Jesus and her working together to give me the message, like, this is so pleasing to me that I would give you 1,000 roses for doing this. And I just overcame it that way. And just began to learn more about them and came to an understanding of the saints and how they're our friends up in heaven, and they love to help us just like I would love to help any of my friends down here with their prayers and their needs.
I love that way of expressing it. First of all, I have to say, I know you and I were destined to be friends, because the first thing is that I have several good friends from Conyers, Georgia, and I didn't know that's really? Actually where you were. And I've visited there, and I've been to some wonderful sacred sites in your neighborhood. So that's a very holy place. And then secondly, my patroness is St. Therese of Lisieux. And friends who have heard me talk about this before know that we grew up in a family where my grandmother, her maiden name is Martin, and she comes from the area of France that St. Therese is from. And so I always grew up with a relic in my home, and with parents who told me, oh, she's kind of like a distant cousin of yours. So, long before I really, long before I understood her spirituality, I loved her. And then as a grown up, I've really come to love her more because her place as a doctor of the church is really based on this beautiful spirituality that she has. And I think a lot of people misunderstand her because they see kind of the holy card images of this really sticky, sweet, this young woman, and she's always carrying roses around. And men in particular often are like, oh, I don't get the fascination with her. But her profound love for Jesus, I think, is something that all of us can find a little bit of in our life. And one thing that I love in reading her writings, when you kind of take the sticky sweet out of it, and she's really very practical about little ways that everybody can fall in love with Jesus. So I love that. I love that she was the one who drew you into what's now really your life's work. So tell us a little bit about Rosa Mystica Metals, about how this got started, and a little bit more about the business.
Okay. Well, I'm a collector. I love to collect little things, and I started collecting antique saint metals because they're just, if you really look at them, the art on them, they're just beautiful, particularly the older ones. And then as I collected more and more, I'm like, I don't need all these. I think I'll start a little business. I'll sell them on eBay, I think is what I was doing it on. And some of them I get there, they were just gorgeous. And I knew, it was making money, and I was like, we could use that money, but I hate to get rid of this one. And then I did a little research and sort of figured out a way that I could recast them using like a silicone mold. And I got this silver clay and I fixed up a little kiln in my sunroom and started recasting them in silver clay. That it's a clay that burns away, and then there's nothing left but pure silver. And it made a beautiful little image of the metal, and started selling those. But it's very time consuming to make them, and very labor intensive. And I also teach pre-K during the school year, and so that was leaving me no time to do anything else. And so the business fortunately became so more successful, and then we looked into having them recast in sterling silver, and found an amazing shop very close to us. I'd found lots of shops that were like, we'll do 1,000, we'll do 500. Like, I don't need that many. And I called them. They're good old Georgia boys. And I said, what's the fewest number you'll do? He goes, 1. I was like, y'all are the guys for me. And we've made a great little working partnership. And it has just blossomed from there. So I still love collecting the antique metals. I have a whole catalog with all the original metals in them. And so now I don't even have to look at, is it made out of, a lot of older metals are not made out of great materials. They can be brass. Antique ones can even be aluminum. They can have a lot of wear on them. But I just have to concern myself, is that a beautiful depiction of that saint? Do I think that is going to speak to people? Does it speak to me? If it doesn't speak to me, I'm not going to do it. And we recast them in sterling and some in bronze. And they're all just gorgeous. I say when they're done, it's so exciting to get a new one cast and add it to the collection and just see how it turns out. So that's sort of a quick synopsis of how we got where we are.
Can I ask you, were you kind of a crafty person before you started this casting process? Like, had you been somebody you were? Okay.
Yeah. I do art, I paint, I do all that stuff.
So you weren't intimidated by, you're probably more intimidated by running a business than diving into the crafting aspect of it.
The business part is totally beyond me. So when John came on, my husband, working with me this past year, it's been so wonderful because he has a business mind and he can do that aspect, and I can concentrate on the art aspect of it, and it's made a great balance. And we found out, gosh, we haven't killed each other working together. We actually enjoy it, and it's been great.
How did you come up with the name for the business?
It came to me. I wish I had some great story about how I found it.
I think St. Therese sent it to you.
Really yeah, I think you're right. Probably. I wanted to use, I think, a Marian name just because so many of her metals are beautiful, and I wanted her to be a part of our work. And I believe it was in a litany that I saw it and just thought it was gorgeous and decided to use it.
And it means mystical rose, right? Rosa Mystica.
Right.
Beautiful.
Rosa Mystica. It's a very old name for the Virgin Mary, the mystical rose. Yes.
Well, I have a lot of questions about religious medals, and I think I'm going to come at it from the perspective of maybe somebody who hasn't really ever had a medal before or who doesn't understand them. I laughed when you said you were a collector of little things, because I collect two things in my life.
Yeah.
One of them is pins, lapel pins from places that I've visited, and I have a vest, like an adventurer kind of vest in my closet that's covered over with lapel pins. But then my second thing that I collect is religious medals, and for a long time when I would go speak someplace, I would try to find the medal of that particular, the patron of that parish or wherever.
Right.
And my collection has become quite prolific, and it's very unorganized. So I need to do a better job of organizing it. But these medals, there's something of there's a real history to religious medals, and I'm sure you know more about that than I do, about why we have them and really what it means to wear a medal. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, religious medals have been around for a long, long time. I mean, if you look at the St. Jude medal, St. Jude himself on his medal is frequently depicted holding a medal. So they've been around quite a long time. It is a way of, like, instead of, they couldn't carry around a family picture, and a lot of these saints, of course, there's not a picture of them. They would have a medal made that they could carry with them at all times, just to remind them of that saint's protection and guidance. And like I said, it's like carrying around a family photo in a certain sense. Well, you don't have to pull it out. It's just with you all the time. And, of course, people typically wear them on a chain around their neck. But I've made myself a charm bracelet. I probably have 10 different medals, each one with a different meaning to me, on my charm bracelet. Or I know men particularly carry them on their keychains. And I have a friend that even made a purse charm out of hers. So they're just all different ways you can do whatever works best for you to help you feel that connection to whichever saint you like.
I have a funny story about a medal, and it's that when my boys were in high school, we went to purchase a car for them. We were going to buy a used car for them, and it was one of those deals where we found the perfect car on eBay, and we drove to go find it, and it was kind of a funny car. It was a PT Cruiser. My son played upright bass in high school, and so we needed a particular size of a car that could fit the bass into it. But we didn't want it to be a fast car, and we wanted it to be a little, uncool, because that would maybe slow them down a little bit in their teenage driving. But I felt so worried about this, giving them the car, and that they would be driving themselves to school and everything. And so we made the purchase of the car from someone who didn't strike me as a particularly holy person. I didn't get to know him religiously, but I'll just say, based on the peripheral experience that I had of him, the first thought wasn't, oh wow, that's a really holy man. It was something different. And when we brought the car home, I went to clean out the glove compartment, and there in the glove compartment was a very, very old St. Christopher medal. And
cool.
And we reached out to him, but I have to tell you, and he said, oh, just keep it. I think my mom probably put that in there. But it reminded me, I immediately felt bonded to that car. And I felt the protection, and simply because that's something of our family history, a religious medal that we know. I've had those in cars for many years, and just to find it pre-equipped with that was a real comfort to me. So why do you think that medals kind of speak to people? Why do we want to have these, and why do you find people who collect them?
People collect them or purchase them for all different reasons. Sometimes it's a family situation, or a particular worry they have, or like you say, your child is going to be driving a new car. It's a way of visually seeing a tangible point of your trust in that saint, your trust in God. It makes you, if I have a St. Christopher medal, say, in my child's car, I can remind myself of that. I have put this in the Lord's hand. St. Christopher is praying for him. And give myself, as a mom, some measure of peace instead of just going down that rabbit hole of what if. I tend to be a worrier. So to me, it's very helpful in that measure in terms of giving into people. I've just had so many amazing stories of people who bought saints for, St. Peregrine for cancer, St. Bernadette just for the ill. There's just something comforting about feeling you have that friend in heaven who is praying for you and there for you and giving you that touchstone with your faith when you're going through some sort of crisis. I know we had a very difficult time with our middle son, who, thank God, is doing fantastically now, but I just wore a path to St. John Bosco's door, patron of difficult boys and children, and it just brought me a lot of comfort to feel like I wasn't alone in that. And my husband, too. We had someone we could turn to who was going to pray with us and who understood from his earthly life of dealing with difficult boys and setting up schools and helping young men find their way. He would be there for Will as well.
I love that you talk about this in terms of placing it in the context of prayer, because one thing that concerns me sometimes is having people who don't necessarily understand that this is not like a lucky charm. So, for example, I'll sometimes meet people who tell me, "Oh, well, I put I wanted my husband to join the church, so I put like a medal under his side of the bed," and I think it's always important to remember that sacramentals, they're not voodoo charms. They're not, something that can work magic, but that they're a reminder always to draw closer in prayer to, the source of all goodness, to God. So I'm kind of curious about the medals that your company, Rosa Mystica, makes available. These are really special in that they're not kind of the average run-of-the-mill medals that you would find in a, for $2 in a little, Catholic bookstore.
Right.
There's something really special. Now, why the decision to go with the more antique medals, and how are those different from other types of medals?
Well, Gus, there are a lot of ways that they are different. Number one is just the craftsmanship in them, and they're different phases. I've learned as I've handled these medals all these years. The ones from the early 19th century, late 18th century, be generally rougher, larger, and heavier. And then you come into sort of the golden age of medal making, where they have these amazing designs, and art medals came into fashion. And those are some of the most beautiful medals you will find from around 1900 up through the 30s. And then that tradition continued into the 40s and 50s, but a little more mass production. You can still find amazing, beautiful medals. And another thing is a lot of the medals, the older medals, they have various shapes. They have just amazing, unique details to them. And a lot of them are double-sided. I like to call those best friend medals, where you might have St. Francis on one side and St. Clare on the other, or St. Jane Chantal on one side and St. Francis de Sales on the other. These two saints that worked closely together in life are then together on the medal. And I don't think you see that very often now at all. You sort of get 2 for 1 with that type of thing. But just being able to look at the tenderness of expression on their faces in these, or the details of their life that they put on there. For example, each one on some level can tell the story of that saint. I have a St. Monica medal that we just love, and it shows her standing by the ocean. There is a little boat in the distance, and there is a bird over her head. And this is all on a 3/4 inch medal, but I can see that, and since I've studied St. Monica, I know she sent, Augustine went on a ship, and she prayed for his safety on the ship, so that's why the boat is there. And then she later followed him, and then the bird is the Holy Spirit, a representation of that speaking through her. So, it really relates to her life. Or if you see a saint medal and the saint is carrying a palm branch, that's a symbol of martyrdom. That saint was martyred. If the saint is carrying a sword or arrows with a palm branch, that's probably how they were martyred. And I try to share that in our website because I think it's really cool to know, realize that they can help you learn about the saint and know about their life and how you can relate it to your life. So with our medals, like I said, on the website, I'll tell what the symbolism means, then tell about the saint. And then we make sure to send a holy card with each medal where I have written out a brief synopsis of the saint's life. So say you're getting it to give to somebody, then they know why they got that saint. They can read about that saint and hopefully feel a little more closeness to them.
So I know for myself, as someone who just kind of likes medals and enjoys having them, that oftentimes, like if I find myself in a situation where I'm in like an antique store or something like that, that's sort of one of the things that I kind of look for. It gives me a purpose, if I get to go antiquing, just rather than just looking at everything, I'll have something that I'm directly looking for. That and old books are my two things. But I'm curious about where you source the medals that you cast, and where have been some of your favorite places that you've discovered a medal.
We were just up in Cape Cod for my godson's graduation, and just like you said, found some little old shop and went in there and just found a beautiful, miraculous medal and a couple medals in there. You just sort of stumble on them. And my husband's from New Orleans, and we have found some gorgeous medals down there. And then over time, I've developed some sources, particularly in France, where there are amazing medals, and I can now source them from over there. I wish we got to travel over there all the time and get them. We don't do that very often, but I think the European medals are just amazing. We've also gotten them from Spain and some from Latin America as well.
And the nice thing about this process that you have is when you find one that's just so special, suddenly it becomes something that more than just one person can have, that you can make it available. What are some of the most popular medals that you guys have?
Joan of Arc is the most popular medal.
Really?
Yes. Isn't that interesting? A lot of people can just relate to her on many different levels. I think particularly women that are dealing with the struggles of life today. If you are a mom who works outside the home, boy, she was certainly dealing with difficult men in her life or difficult people to work with. She's also it's really cool to think she was a teenager and that she led an army, she wore armor. I think people are just fascinated with her, and her story is really amazing. Then St. Michael is very popular, of course, for just heavenly protection and guidance. It depends sometimes on the time of year. In the winter, we get more orders for St. Bernard medals. He's the patron saint of skiers. St. Margaret is popular, particular for women and childbirth. And of course, St. Francis of Assisi. We really have quite a few beautiful ones of him. People just love him for his message and his care of animals. So I think people can go for them either. They might see the beauty of a particular medal that they like and then get that medal because they think it's beautiful and then forge a connection with the saint. Or people can come at it like, I love that saint. I want to buy their medal. So we really try to look for the really unusual, striking, beautiful ones. And I have to say, I'm really, really pleased with the ones that we've been led to find.
It's beautiful. I love looking at your website. If folks want to go find it, it's at rosamysticamedals.com, and we'll have a link in our show notes for that so that you can click through and find that and the beautiful Rosa Mystica Etsy store. But also, Susan, you guys are active on social media with Facebook and Instagram. And just say a little bit about how kind of this work that you do maybe is an act of the new evangelization in your own special way, especially on places like social media.
I hope it is. That social media has been a learning experience for me, for sure, how to work it and all. But you never know who's going to see what you put out there and who's going to share it with somebody else. So, yeah, it's really fun to be able to use that. And I've tried to work up a YouTube channel telling people about saints and through their medals. So like I said, that's really something that sometimes can be a challenge to me just because I haven't grown up with that. But my kids help me, and I agree. I think it's great to use any type of new media to get that message out there, particularly to young people.
How ironic is it that God has given this mission to the woman with saint phobia to go out and to be a witness to?
It is. It's just crazy. If someone had told me this years ago, I would have said, "You are nuts. There is no way." But, with God, there is a way. I guess this must have been part of his plan for us. And it just makes me really happy. I think as a Christian, as a Catholic, we all want to be open to God's plan. We all want to be used by him in some special way. And it just tickles me no end that this is the way right now that we're able to reach people for him.
Well, he often, in my mind, has an excellent sense of humor, and yes. And I love that you said yes to this mission, and that it continues to flourish and develop in new ways. I'm so happy to have discovered your work, and it's going to be a big stop for me in the future when I have gifts to purchase for different people. Right. That I think purchasing the gift of a religious medal is both a lovely, beautiful gift, but also one that shows your continual prayer for the person that you make the gift to. So I want to thank you for being a new source of gifts. As we close out our time together, I'm wondering if there are any kind of closing comments that you have to share with our listeners.
Well, I would just suggest that if someone is not familiar with the concept of saints, or if they don't have a particular patron saint that they have in their lives, just be open to that. And if you're going through any particular difficulty in your life or any challenges, there is a saint literally for everything. And whether you buy a medal or not, they are there to help you. And, don't be afraid to ask for that help. I think it is very pleasing to God when we look to our friends in heaven for help.
I love that. Well, Susan, I'm so glad that you're my new friend now, and I hope we get to meet in person sometime soon. And until then, I'll really enjoy visiting rosamysticalmedals.com. And I just want to thank you for your time with us today.
Gosh, thank you for talking with me. I've enjoyed it. This has been really fun.
Well, thanks, and God bless. And friends, that's about it for this week's episode of Lisa, Hendey and Friends. I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation, and I do really encourage you to go over and to visit Susan and John Monroe's beautiful rosamysticamedals.com. We'll have links in our show notes wherever you listen to this podcast. I just want to ask you a favor. If you have listened and you enjoy the show, would you consider going over and leaving a review for us on iTunes, or just a simple star rating? That really helps in spreading the word and getting the message out about this show, and it helps me to continue to improve in what I'm doing to serve you, which is the basic element of this, is that I want to bring forward conversations that uplift and educate you, and that just inspire you in your daily walk of faith. So I thank you for those of you that have done that and those who have shared their feedback with me. I'm also always looking for great guests. So if you're a listener and you'd want to come on the show sometime as a guest, definitely reach out to me with an email. You can reach me anytime at lisa@catholicmom.com. And I just love to connect with you and have conversations. So that is it for this week. I will be definitely with you in prayer in the days ahead. And again, I want to encourage you to check out rosamysticamedals.com. And until next week, I wish you and yours all the best. Have an awesome week, friends. God bless.
Introducing the redesigned CatholicSingles.com, featuring new ways that put the spotlight on the person and their faith, not just a profile picture. For the past 20 years, faithful Catholics have used CatholicSingles.com, and the reimagined CatholicSingles.com website is ready to help single Catholics take the next step in sharing meaningful relationships with other faithful Catholics. Remember, CatholicSingles.com for faith, fellowship, and love.